Hi, my name is Ankit. I'm a co-founder at Clearfield and a host at Huddles. Huddles is a talk show by Clearfield where we engage with customer success and support leaders or operations leaders and try and learn their perspective on how um, the support and customer engagement practices are evolving with the advent of Slack and Microsoft Teams. I'm extremely excited to have Mike with me today from Allied Tech Advisors. He's the chief operating officer there, and they have embedded Slack as a core part of their communication channel with customers. So extremely excited to have him and hear his perspective on how it has helped and what are some of the things that they had to do as they incorporated this within their stack. So before we dive in, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the company and what do you folks do?
Thank you so much. So we've been using Slack for maybe like 7-8 years, mostly just internal, but now we've been shifting over to client communication because it reduces that barrier and it creates like more of a synchronous communication. And Clearfield has been great to kind of bridge that gap of creating tickets and keeping everything tracked, because now it's with our expansion of client base and different sites and different users, it's hard to keep track of everything. So putting things into triage channels now with Clearfield is great. But we're just a small MSP, we're a technology advisor company with multiple clients under management, and we use majority of our communication and even ticket intakes is through Slack. That's like our core system. We have backend systems that create tickets and everything else, but Slack is like where we do a lot of our communication with clients and projects and scoping as well. And we do mostly IT support, advisement, a lot of it's a core infrastructure really for IT, and we have a good team with us, and Clearfield allows us to scale really well.
Got it. So Mike, taking a step back before we dive into the technical stack on how you've been able to manage this, but taking a step back, tell us a little bit more about like the type of customer segment that you support, and like how Slack came out to be a channel that was very relevant for that segment. So maybe if you can share a little bit more about this.
Sure. So our primary verticals right now are like financial, accounting, law firms, manufacturing. We do have K-12 education as well, and a few side small businesses. We make sure we kind of fit the alignment for the client as well. But now with Slack, it kind of allows that bridge for a lot of communication to all different verticals, especially with like the documentation, the history. You have a legacy, and again, Clearfield kind of allows you to have that legacy, and you can reference a ticket number in it to pull everything up. But we've kind of been scaling up. Even some of our existing clients, we actually have like multiple Slack, external client-facing channels for different sites. So this site has one, a bunch of users. This site has another one. So that way they all kind of filter to a different triage channel. We have auto attendance now, like with using workflows built into Clearfield. You can kind of have, so if you're after hours, it'll say, send a nice message, say, oh, please contact this number, or, our Slack team is not available. So all these great tools, and we have maybe about like 60 client-facing channels right now.
Wow, so 60 client-facing channels, and who typically are on these channels from the customer side perspective? Yeah.
Typically, the direct point of contacts. We have a lot of co-managed agreements where we do more of the advisement, alignment, and then the internal help desk, like, oh, I need my printer fixed or something like that, is done by a point of contact. So we can kind of direct and do more strategic approach instead of reactive.
Got it. Very interesting. And also curious, like, did Slack evolve naturally for you, or like was it a ask from the customers, or was it a call from your side that you wanted to do, Slack-based kind of support and so on?
Yeah. It kind of naturally evolved. That's what we're good at doing. We can pivot very quickly to where the market is dictating. So Slack is like, it just evolved naturally into, hey, this is we're using this for quick communication. It gives it timestamps of everything. It gives legacy logs, clear expectations, And the next thing you know, we tried to pilot test it with a few of our clients, and we had a good reception because now it kept our text off the phone. So that way, if you're in a channel and you have a ticket, say, hey, can you look at this ticket? What do you think? You can see the whole history. It's no ambiguity of restating your questions. So you have that customer service level where you have a whole legacy. You can kind of see, oh, all right, I understand what happened, or you can reference a message that caused the incident or whatever you're handling. But yeah, naturally progressed into Slack communication, and now we're using it mostly for strategic conversations. Reactive stuff, we still have you can call a help desk and somebody will answer. And we have a ticketing system for a slower SLA, but Slack again we're trying to shift it to a more proactive, strategic approach. There's always going to be reactive things like, oh, the server's having issues or something like that, and we can dive into it. But it's allowing for a really good scale.
Very interesting. So you're saying that you so typically what's you have a ticketing system, I'm guessing ConnectWise, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, we use ConnectWise Manage as our PSA. So that's like our main ticketing system.
So how do you set expectations of what comes on Slack, what comes on ConnectWise, and who within the client team would kind of raise issues at either of those two platforms? Just curious to learn what was the thought process and the journey in kind of setting those expectations.
Yeah, you can. I mean, the whole philosophy is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. Some clients just really like to call. That's what it is. There's we have things in place where we can kind of redirect the client to the correct mode of if a client says, hi, can you make this new email address, and we'll respond in Slack, sure, let me make a ticket, and then we shift it to the the ticket system out where we have the first name, last name, and or whatever information we need to create a new user, things like that. But we have everything, all roads lead to triage. That's where everything kind of goes. So we have a triage channel for Slack intakes, no matter what they are, and we can kind of triage. All right, is this a reactive request? Is this a proactive request? Is this a project? Is this a alignment thing? Or is this an alert of something else that we missed? Maybe our alerting system didn't act on it. But yeah, everything kind of going to triage and then handling it from there based on the nature of the request.
So it seems pretty interesting, right? So you're saying that you have set up. So what is this triage channel? Maybe if you can shed a little bit more light on do you have who are on these channels? Where are the inputs coming to these channels, and so on, right? If you can share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so majority of it, we have again different triage channels for different clients, because you can kind of create different groups on that. But the same people the service desk managers that handle these phone intakes, they also have they have the triage channel as an active channel that they have to watch. So they're in charge of okay, hey, acknowledging if no tech is available, or saying, talking to the other tech team on Slack, hey, whatever CF409 needs this, are you available? Or then the tech can jump into the triage channel and start communicating with the client. If they don't have a backlog, if they have a backlog, then the service desk manager will say, someone will get back to you. We'll create a ticket, and then it goes into the call it the deli counter. It's like the queue, ticket queue, first in, first out, or based on priority. It's we have a whole bunch of different priorities to handle it, but one triage channel handled by service desk managers, and then they handle the tech handoff. So if a tech is available, then tech kind of goes to it and puts logs everything in there. You have timestamps of when the tech first handled it, and then if you need to escalate, you can add that tech and bring it to. We have other triage channels. We have the core triages where everything where most of the stuff goes, and then we have triages for different roles, the service desk or professional services. Can kind of discuss on these internal channels about referencing a ticket, and then they can bring other resources in if they need to. So again, that's how we're handling it. It's working out pretty well.
So seems a pretty involved operation. So curious to learn, I think it seems like you've taken a call to build a lot of operations Slack first internally as well. So just trying to understand the overall queue management. How do you handle across, are all your customers on Slack from which incoming requests are coming? And are there other channels also from these requests, from which requests come? And then how do they funnel into these triage channels, and how does the allocation happen? Maybe if you can shed a little bit more light on that.
Yeah, so you can either create a ticket from like, again, we're IT company. You can either create it. We have, I think, like 5 or 6 different ways to, technically create a ticket, but they all funnel to Slack. Either the triage channel for the clear feed, intake. So here's a client that they put an intake in, they message something, so then we have that triage for clear feed, or we have an informational channel that says like, hey, a new ticket was created for this team, and then you can click right into it from Slack, and it takes you to the hyperlink of in ConnectWise Manage to reference the ticket, so you can assign it and manage it. Then we have SLA breaks, like, oh, this wasn't acknowledged in a reasonable time, so it'll alert, et cetera, et cetera. But all systems, no matter where it's created, go to Slack somewhere.
Got it, right? And how many, just trying to get a sense of the operation size also, right? How many tech folks do you have attending to these queries? And are there different triage managers who do the first level of response and triaging? And how is that set up there?
Yeah, so the initial triaging is done by a non-technical reps. There are service desk managers. They handle answering phones. They handle, other tasks. And then it gets triaged to, like very basic. It, is what's broken. Simple like, hey, what's broken. If not, then they make a ticket. They can hand it off. And then once it goes into like a higher level, like a design desk discussion, then it gets done by engineers. It'll get put onto the professional board, but then the triaging from that end will be done by engineers. So that way you can know, oh, okay, this is a server build out. This is going to take, weeks, or we have to plan this, scope it out properly, versus like, oh, we got to move this drive to another, data from one thing to another. That can take, a few minutes. So it's the initial triage is done by non-technical, but the like advanced technical, for we call them like move, add, or changes, that's done by engineers.
Got it, right? So after the initial triage, where do you move the workload management or allocation towards? Does that move to ConnectWise from there, or that do you
Yeah,
use?
everything is in ConnectWise and tickets, and it kind of just, we have workflows that kind of create different SLAs on all like we have maybe 4 or 5 different boards that have different expectations, and so that way oh, I'm in this board. Here's the expectation set for this one.
So, so if I hear you right, there are a couple of, so Slack is one channel, and then there is, people can also call up and then raise a ticket. Do you all also offer email or any other service, or like it's,
Yeah, you can email our main support email. Then that there's an email connector. I sent it to ConnectWise, but then once it lands, because ConnectWise is like the main database. But we have the front end of Slack that kind of can send it. Like when we have a clear feed intake, we have a Zapier integration that'll send that clear feed intake to ConnectWise. So we have the timestamp, who did it, et cetera.
Got it.
Once the integration is set up between Manage and Slack, clear feed, then we can, it'll be nice. But right now it's kind of a band-aid solution because I don't have the time to really design a good integration yet.
So, so incoming requests are coming from Slack, email, or calls. All of them land over to triage. From there, the first line of response, the triage, the non-tech reps would kind of try and resolve. If that's resolved, that's great. Otherwise, they'll kind of create a, otherwise they will kind of hand it over to another, like the tech folks, depending on the type of priority, and then
yeah, we have like escalation limits. If it's taking too long on a ticket, it goes to an escalation board. Then a professional team will take a look into it and handle it.
And just one question: what are the percentage of queries which are coming across these 3 different channels, Slack, email, and phone calls? Like just at a high level, just out of curiosity, just trying to get a sense of, for your customer base, where is it coming from?
What you talking about, like the general intakes, or like what?
Yeah, what percentage of intakes are coming from Slack versus email versus phone calls?
Yes, I mean Slack. We're trying to do very proactive planning. It usually goes directly to the a professional service board, but there are still some reactive tickets that we try to we can handle and move over. But from a very high level, immediate need is usually phone call.
Right.
Or Slack, like, hey, something is critical, you have to get in touch with somebody real quick. It's either a phone call or Slack. They both get acknowledged real fast. Any kind of low priority things is usually like, okay, the help desk board, you can kind of create a ticket, document it, and it'll be done at in a reasonable time.
Got it. Understood. Right. And then how do you close the loop from, once the request is solved, right? On Slack, do the engineers go and kind of respond on Slack, or how's the setup like over there?
Yeah, so they'll respond. We have a workflow that sends the direct link of the triage into, like, when the service desk managers handle the initial intake, and if the engineers are busy, they'll send it over to ConnectWise Manage. So that way it's okay, it's on the board, it exists there, and then in the internal notes has a direct link in Slack to that triage. So that way the engineer can just click the link right from their ticket that they're assigned to, and they go right and they start communicating with the client, and then see where they're at. And then when they're finished, they close it out, and then it's closed in the ticket. We have the time entries put against it, and we could move on to the next one. So we're trying to reduce as many barriers as possible, because the tech shouldn't be putting all these entries in, like, okay, here's this. The triage handles all the non-technical, and then tech just kind of works. So that way they can move on to the next thing real fast.
Got it. Understood. And like, from a customer perspective, what were some of the positive things that happened when you opened up Slack? Or how long have you been doing this, right? And then what have been like the positive responses or negative responses from customers about this service channel?
It just comes down to knowledge and understanding what's like, so again, everybody has their way. Some people just like texting, they like, phone calls, they like the face-to-face meetings. You kind of have to mirror what people are used to.
Right.
We try using Slack. Some clients just, they're very resistant to, like, we have some clients that actually email, because when Slack, you ping somebody and then they don't respond on Slack, it'll email them, so then they'll respond to the email. I feel bad for the Slack engineers at Salesforce, because they have to make sure all these workflows work as well. But it's just easier for our documentation. We try, some clients just, they want the old school way, and it's fine. So we still chat internally because it's much faster, and we have a lot of benefits on it because we have a lot of integrations that work with it.
Right.
But you can, whatever is recommended for the client that they want to use. So we try our best.
Got it. Right. So your philosophy still as a company is to be where the customers are, and the added benefit that you see with Slack is, one, you're calling out very distinctly is the context, right, which is the entire trail of conversations. Tell me a little bit more about this. How does that help, right, both the customers and your team? That'll be a very interesting thing, because that's different about this channel, right? That you have the entire context about
exactly, entire history, and the key is the timestamps. Like, as soon as that intake is put, like, you can see like a whole history, and then you have, okay, at this time, it was created. These people, this client always makes tickets around 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. or something like that. Like, majority, you can look up a lot of data once you have the timestamps, and like who created, who's the requester, what the nature of the requests are. It's invaluable for that. But yeah, the full legacy history is great. And then what we can do is you send the whole history, you send it to like ChatGPT or any AI that can like condense it and summarize this entire ticket in a very succinct way, so that way you can save the engineers time when documenting the whole ticket. Like, what did Bob do with Mary? Okay, here we go. Like, summarize it, here are the bullet points, and then you can move on. So that's, again, Zapier integrates with that. We have Roost we're going to try out. It's just AI conversions of, so we could summarize the entire conversation without an engineer spending, 30 minutes trying to decipher, what was said here? It's like, you gotta hear a very succinct summarization.
Yeah. So before handing over, doing a summarization so that they can kind of act on things faster.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do the engineers hop onto Slack, direct Slack channels, and then communicate with customers via that, or is it via the not like the first line of responders? What's the typical setup like?
The engineers once the handoff is done, it's like, hey, I have time to work on this. Then the engineer will do direct communication with the client. Unless it's an escalation. If it's an escalation, then usually it's like you don't want to have too many, hands in the pot. Then the engineer will tell the initial text, like, here's how you do it. Just, I'll do X, Y, and Z, and then they'll be like the intermediary.
Got it. Interesting. And what's the ratio of engineers to the first line of responders? Just out of curiosity, just trying to get a sense of those.
Yeah, our team is like almost every one has. I mean, even the first levels have some, because after you see enough tickets, like, we know what this is. So technically, everyone is, an engineer, but the different levels, I would say probably about 20% of employees are the service desk, and they handle like administrative stuff.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. So very interesting. Like just the entire setup is pretty enlightening. Now, as you were trying to scale this, and over a period of time, what have been some of the learnings in terms of what were some of the problems as we got through this, right? And the primary reason is operational challenges on just being able to manage it, because typically everybody's used to everything on ConnectWise or whatever is the PSA that they're using, and that's how they build their entire routing allocation operations on top of it, right? So curious to, as you thought about doing this, right, what were some of the top most challenges that you had to solve?
Yeah, it's so one of the biggest challenge is barrier to entry and having trust with verify. Like having Slack as a quick barrier, it's like, okay, you have it on the mobile, you have it on this, you could do everything really fast. The backend systems are not as fast, so like we're very time focused, where we value our time, we value clients' time, we value getting things resolved in a fast and timely manner. So Slack allows for that, and then Clearfeed kind of assists with that reduced barrier to entry in terms of time. I think I'm breaking up a little bit, so I'm just making sure the network connection's good. But that's okay.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think your voice is clear. I think the video is breaking up.
Okay.
Okay, got it. What were some of the things? So how long have you been offering Slack, right, with customers? How long has it been?
Um, Probably, it started as like, hey, this is a really cool tool. Let's use it for some, pilot test clients. And then probably maybe 5 years. I'm trying to actually look up the data. I don't want to say anything that's completely inaccurate, but actually, I think I could do this right now. Check the. I'm going to look up the channel creation history on some of these. 2018, March. There we go. Pretty close.
So, the question I had was, so what do you know now that you didn't know? If you would want to, do a lot more earlier, if you were to offer Slack. And a follow-up question to that is, what would your other MSPs be if you really think about offering Slack? Should they do it? Yes or no? If they do it, what are the benefits? And
Exactly.
if
Yeah, because
they
it's like.
decide, yeah,
Because I remember talking to our other peer groups, and one of the biggest things is like, you're saying all those notifications, because they use like most of the MSPs use Teams right now. We pay for Teams, we use Teams, we still pay for Slack, just like GitHub. They got bought by Microsoft. They still have Slack on their on their billing, because it's like, it's a good product, it's fast. So one of their biggest pain points is like, how do you handle, like, okay, what you're saying, all these engineers have all these pings, everything. I'm like, no, you mute all those channels in the group. Like, all those channels are muted, and you just have to focus on one. Thanks to Clearfeed, they can handle, hey, here's your group A clients, group B, pod 1, pod 2, green pod, red pod, whatever you want to call those group of techs that handle that amount of either revenue or amount of endpoints. There's all these different metrics to see how you can handle a client. You can look at how many tickets, whatever works. But having the triage channel, so a tech can just focus on one. It's like, oh, here's the handoff for a new ticket from your pod. Then you can communicate with them. You're only in this subset. You don't have to be in all of them. It's great. And we use Slack for like product evaluations. We have maybe like 50 different product evaluations. We're constantly evaluating on our research and development type cycle. It's like, okay, this one's time for an evaluation, or this one has too many tickets associated with it. And then we're using what our clients have as dictates what our expertise is in. So if a majority of our clients are moving towards this type of products, then our expertise is going to be in that. So again, volume fixes everything. So that's what our knowledge is based on volume. So if we have all our clients are on this, or it's like a really new product that everyone should be having, we roll it out and we evaluate it. But again, we have a bunch of triage channels, a bunch of product channels, a bunch of sales admin channels, and then all the client channels. And we use it for vendors as well. Like we work with other vendors that are in our space. Like we're an IT company, but like we can work with a phone company. So we have external client-facing channels with phone companies, with wiring companies, with we call them centers of influence. So I think we have maybe 15 different channels with that, so that we could discuss like, oh, I have a lead for here, hey, are you can you handle this, yada yada. So it allows for that communication. That's a separate triage channel though, that really doesn't go to the service desk manager. That kind of goes to more of the project team. If like anything from a vendor channel, unless they're a vendor that has technical support, then we move them back to the triage channel. I think there's like one or two of those that like, oh, they're a vendor that, but they sometimes call for technical support. We move them to the main triage so that it's handled properly.
Sure. So very interesting again. So what would you advise other MSPs, right? Do you think they should open up Slack as a channel to their customers, or Teams as a channel of support to customers? And what are the benefits that they would see if they would do that?
Yeah, it comes down to the use of the tool. I mean, it's great if you're a Slack power user or a Teams power user and you do a lot of your communication in there and you're comfortable with it. Opening it up for start small, start with like a subset, pilot it with some test users that you can see value, and then if the clients really like it and they really like that communication, then you can kind of scale up. And then that's once you scale to a certain we call it again signal to noise ratio. We call it like TLDR. If you have more than 10 active channels, you're not going to be really able to pay attention. So once you have like maybe 10 or 5 channels, that's when Clearfeed can really help you manage those clients. So that way you're not constantly bouncing between all these channels to make sure, oh, where was I over here? Where was I? Because it's like multitasking, switch tasking, all that stuff. It gets kind of crazy. So that's why having it dedicated focus with like, hey, I'm going to handle this, and this is my ticket I'm working with. Here's my one thread. You can pop. What's nice about Slack, you can pop out separate windows so they can work on that one thread with that client. Okay, they know where they're going, and then they close it out, put their time entry in, they're done.
Got it. Got it. Do you see Teams in your customer base as a channel that customers prefer, or is it predominantly been Slack?
It's again, every channel clients use different things. We kind of like having because if the client already uses Teams internally, they have to switch to like a different workspace to kind of communicate with us to a different thing. We have the same thing with Slack. There's a few clients that have their own workspaces, so they know to switch between us. But if needed, we can send. I guess you could do Teams to Clearfeed, but right now we kind of have every one of our clients using Slack in some way, because it's a little bit faster to move between things. Because once you have that barrier, it's like even switching a workspace, it's like that delay. It's like, okay, maybe I don't need to make this ticket, or I'll just email, or I'll just do this instead. So, we try to again make everything concise.
Got it, right? So you're saying that if I hear you right, that Teams experience, even if you were to set up shared channels or channels with customers, it will make people kind of shift their team space, right, to be able to do, which adds additional friction, and people would rather kind of pick up a phone or
Exactly. Yeah, and then especially when like you're troubleshooting, someone sends a picture real quick, like they already have Slack on their phone. Oh, okay, let me just send this instead of texting to another number. Then you have to copy that number, so you send it to the team. It's like all those extra layers. Every time you have like that friction between, okay, this is one system to another system to another system. It slows down that getting to that resolution and fixing that initial issue. So yeah, Slack has been great, and Clearfeed kind of really helps once you get that you hit that threshold, of a lot of intakes coming at you.
Got it. Got it. If you were to maybe qualitatively comment before Clearfeed, after Clearfeed, what would you say as qualitative improvement in terms of your first line of response managers, or like you as a overall leader, right, in terms of what you see qualitatively before and after implementation of Clearfeed?
Yeah, so quantitative, because I'm the operation, so quantitative, I was kind of discouraging certain clients from being on Slack because I'm like, this is going to be too noisy. We're going to forget messages. It's going to be lost. It's going to be a nightmare of management. Like even if when you're trying to have a technician, oh, you're in charge of these 5 channels, and like 4 of those channels are active and having conversations. Like, okay, you need more resources if I'm someone that's not familiar with it. It becomes a signal to noise headache. The technicians probably would be on 7 cups of coffee a day. But now with Clearfeed, it kind of quality wise, now we have I have no problem putting it for every client. Like every client can use Slack now because I know it's the same flow. They all roads go to triage. No one's going to forget an intake because we have this, because Clearfeed allows for an SLA break where if a message is not answered by, like, say the service desk managers, both of them are handling different things, or they're both up from their desk or whatever. If it's not answered in 15 minutes, it goes to another channel where it's like an alert, like, hey, this hasn't been answered for whatever the time threshold is. I think we set it for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Depends on the client agreements, I think, and where they're, what their expectations are. We have like SLA thresholds, like, hey, this wasn't answered, or this commitment wasn't done. Again, these are all things that like we see what the tool can do, and then we try to adapt it in our style. But before Clearfeed, I was discouraging clients from using Slack unless it was like, they were very proactive and it's not a reactive mess. But now we can kind of handle a little bit of reactiveness on Slack because we have Clearfeed to assist. And then quality wise, the techs appreciate it because it's like they just don't have to focus on all these different channels anymore. They could mute them all and focus on one. So that's been a great benefit.
Got it. Were you able to quantify in terms of first response times or closure times, anything particular? Were you able to get to something like that?
With actual, time to acknowledgement, I think it's almost instant now. So before Clearfeed, again, we would forget things or something, like anything that was like after hours. But now that, because we have that SLA threshold, it allows that time to acknowledgement to be almost like 0. I don't have the exact metric because it's not a metric. Like we're good with it right now, so it's like almost instantaneous, like the time to acknowledgement on Slack, because of Clearfeed allowing everything to kind of be focused on one channel.
Got it. Pretty interesting. Cool. Yeah. So I think there was one specific question from the attendees, which was around MS Teams, which I think I kind of brought up. Yeah. Do you think, as like one question I asked, the last question I generally ask people who generally are a part of the conversations are, fast forward 5 years, where do you see the communication stack or the support stack with customers evolving? So curious to listen your thoughts, right? So if you visualize help desk in 2027, what would that be?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Our company, just technology is constantly changing. You could say something, 5 years, we would never, like, we don't even do contracts at 5 years or 3 years, because within 5 months things are changing. Like, hey, this new, something is coming out, you need to adapt it, whatever. So in terms of like 5 months, maybe communication could be all over. Like, you have some companies that use Facebook Messenger for, like, initial intakes. You have web chats from websites, like they can have like we have a chat intake on our website where you can kind of message it, but then what it does is a redirect. It actually doesn't pass through the communication. It says, okay, here's how you can contact us. But in terms of the communication, I think Slack will be one of those, because the CEO of Salesforce is like, he's kind of adapting pretty well, and you have to adapt as a technology company always. So if now that Twitter doesn't exist, like everyone's on X, maybe like that communication channel will be prevalent for a certain type of vertical. It's like, okay, now we need to how can we make this work with our current system? So I see the key is signal to noise. If we can get like whatever, all that, everyone's trying different things and just trying to get it right to triage, or right to your triage channel with it, you can have a low barrier where high-end customers using Teams internal, maybe they, they can use that. Like their point of contact will either use Slack or use Teams to communicate to MSP for planning. But again, it determines on whatever the vertical is and what the natural communication method is for that environment. Because the culture could be very different. Like you can have a culture where, oh, I need to see somebody go to my desk and one-on-one, or they want to do a quick question, got a minute, they pull. Some cultures are just like that, but in a constantly adapting world, you kind of always need to pivot very fast and see how you can apply the current tools to the needs of the client and needs of yourself, because time is very valuable, and the more you can harness it and make it clear while still being accurate, then you'll be great as a company.
Yeah. No, I think that's extremely insightful thoughts. So with this, Mike, I close this panel. Again, thank you so much for taking the time out. Very insightful, and I think completely comes off as a conversation coming from an operations guy who's very deep into kind of optimizing both for customer experience as well as at the same time, every ounce of efficiency that you can drive for your team to
Exactly. Yeah.
scale, right? Which kind of completely stands out. So extremely insightful conversation, very, very detail oriented. So thanks a lot, Mike, for taking this time out.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bye.